our show. Together we serve. Welcome to our show. Sit back and enjoy. We will talk with people about their stories. With our host Ramona, we're ready to start. Together we serve. Together we serve. Together we serve. Together we serve. Welcome to our show. Together we serve. Welcome to our show. Sit back and enjoy. Education, inspiration, motivation for business and life. With our host Ramona, we're ready to start.
The real meaning of life is get out of your zone, help other people, find yourself, get agency, feel good about yourself, create some ripples on the pond. The great thing about mentoring is that my mentees grow up and mentor. They write on their tombstone what they talk about to their grandchildren and their children and their friends and the people they mentor, which is what they're proud of, that they did something as a volunteer and they helped people. And through doing that, they created their own self-esteem, their own sense of accomplishment, but you can find enormous happiness through helping other people. By the time you get
Helping people. Well, together we serve. Isn't helping and serving all in one package? I am so excited to have my guest on today. We've become, I guess I'm going to call him friends. I hope he agrees. I'm sure he will. But he's really making a huge impact in the world, especially with our children, which I think is really important. I don't have children myself, but it's such a great way to give back. And he's going to tell you volunteering is the way to go. If you want to meet somebody, you want to grow your business, whatever you're doing, go and volunteer. So let's bring our guest on. Peter, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm rarely speechless, but I'm just so excited to have you on. You've got an impressive background. Just give us a little bit about your background.
Born in London, life changed when my 10th grade English teacher, Mr. Lund, I'm sure he had a first name, but we only called him Mr. Lund. He said, see me after school. Maybe his first name was Mr. Don't know. He said, see me after school. Rarely a good thing. He said, I remember he poked me like this. He said, listen to me. Are you listening? Yes, I'm listening, sir. Okay. If you work about twice as hard, you could get in to a really good university. And I laughed in his face. And I said, my family doesn't go to college or university. My dad left school at 14. I don't think anyone in my family has ever been to university. And he said, oh, well, then it'll be even better because you'll be the first one. And when I look back all those years ago, David Lund, that was his first name, I eventually found out, he changed my life because university was where I found myself. Unfortunately, when I came down, I went up there as a scaredy cat on a full scholarship to Emmanuel College, Cambridge. When I finished my master's, and as they say in England, I came down from college, there was no work of any kind. There was very little work anyway, but there was no work for someone who knew everything about medieval English literature and absolutely nothing about anything else. But I had earned money while I was an undergraduate and getting my master's. I'd earned money as an interpreter because I had reasonably good French. And I was the interpreter for a producer who made a film about the Monte Carlo Rally. And we had a fine old time from Marrakesh up to the northern tip, Tangiers, and then across to Spain and along into France and to Monte Carlo. And at the end of it, Tony Bushing, an amazing, wonderful American producer, he said to me, "You want to come back to LA? You don't know anything about editing. Come back and learn." And I said, "Well, don't I need a visa?" He said, "You do need a visa. We'll get you one." And I said, "Well, would I have a job?" He said, "Yeah, that's why we'd need to get you the visa." And I said, "Where would I have a job?" And he said, "Well, you work for me." And I said, "Would I earn enough that I could, rent somewhere to live? And I hear you have to have a car in LA." He said, "Yeah, well, you can start off for a couple of months. My family, we have a spare bedroom and we have a spare car. And you can use both. Find your feet." And that was my first experience of the fact that America is a most astonishing country in terms of many things, but including generosity. And, I started working. I never consciously realized that I live in America now. What happens is at a certain point you think, well, this is a bummer. Half of my clothes are in the wrong place. And eventually I got my green card, and eventually I went down and raised my right hand and got sworn in as a citizen. Incredibly moving. I take it very seriously. The American dream, it's not a one-way street. The American dream is, we'll let you in, work hard, pay tax, do well, and make sure you're a good citizen, help other people. And I've been trying to do that ever since. And not only do I think I have put a dent in some issues, some problems, some challenges that nobody else seemed to be dealing with, but in addition, I've made myself very, very disproportionately happy by helping other people.
I'm glad you mentioned it. I'm glad I mentioned the background. I usually start with it because you mentioned mentoring. You're a wonderful mentor. I've actually talked to you. I'm telling you now live. I've talked to some people that have heard about your mentoring, and you've made a huge impact. And of course, we'll talk about that story. Do people really need a mentor? I'm talking about everybody.
I think everybody. I mean, I have every Friday morning, I'm on an incredible Zoom with a dozen or so acquaintances and friends. They really are friends now. They mentor me. I mentor them. It is a kind of group therapy for mentors. And I just love it to death. And I save up things to ask for advice on. I think everybody needs a mentor. At this point, because one of my non-profits that I started is called First Star, where we house, educate, and encourage teenage foster kids with the goal of getting them into college so they can make a life and, rise up through the glass ceiling of their abuse and neglect and whatever horrible background they've had. I've mentored hundreds and hundreds of young adults, and I developed a kind of pattern recognition. I realized there's like 24 things that they mostly seem to want to talk about. What is a good risk? What is a bad risk? How can I tell the difference? I'm being bullied. I can't do the math homework. How do I find love? Should I go to college? All of these monster challenges that young adults have. In the case of foster kids, and there's 500,000 of them in the United States, they haven't got anybody to advise them. They're living with strangers. There are no, parents to help them. And what we do is we use 12 huge universities from UCLA right across the country to the University of Miami. And we house the program for grades 10 through 12, I should say 9 through 12, on the university campus. And we kind of use the university every which way as a kind of uncle, family, academic coach, facilities, dorms, lecture theaters, the swimming pools, etc., etc. and it really, really works. In the United States, less than 9% of American foster kids go to colleges or universities. But this most recent June, across the country, we got eight. We didn't get them in. They got themselves in. We just helped. We gave them the ladder, but they climbed up it. 89% went on to colleges and universities, roughly 50-50 within that, to 2-year or 4-year community college or a bachelor's degree. And of course, some of the ones, roughly half of those who go to community college and get an associate's degree, they later convert to a 4-year for their junior and senior year, and they end up with a bachelor's anyway. We've been doing it so long now, not only do we know it works, but we're able to hire back and have as visiting mentor lecturers the adults who have been all the way through our 4 years, then they've been through college, and now they're professionals. We have engineers, we have doctors, we have CPAs, we have musicians, we got everything. An architect and an urban planner. Why do you want to be an urban planner? Because nobody does urban planning for poor neighborhoods, and that's what I'm going to do. So, yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and this audience is called firststar.org. I'll put it up so you guys can see it. We have an interesting title of the show, Starlight, Starbright, First Star I See Tonight, which is that kids' song that we hear. People have reached out because I invite a lot of people, and they're like, well, what's that mean? I says, come to the show. And there's First Star. There it is.
Not my idea.
Right.
One of the things that I say, oh, you want to find love? Well, how are you doing it at the moment? Oh, you go to a bar? Seriously, you're going to choose a mate for the rest of your life while you're drunk and they're drunk? Yeah, good luck with that one. Oh, you flip left and right on an app. You know that picture is AI enhanced, and they don't look anything like that. When you go for the cup of coffee, you could be disappointed because that isn't what they look like. And they say, well, so what should I do? I say, go and volunteer, because that's what I did. That's how I fell in love. That's how I found my wife. So I met a little boy through my cousin. She was still living in England. She was a sort of junior actress. And she met a little boy in Children's Hospital called Sean. And she phoned me and said, I think I've just promised a dying child that he can come to Los Angeles, because I asked him what would make him happy, and he said Disneyland. And I said, well, then we have to do it. Go talk to his mum. Go talk to the doctor. Let's see what we can do. So we flew the little boy and his mum to LA. They all moved, including the cousin, into my apartment back in my single days. And for 2 weeks, we did everything you're not supposed to do with a dying child. And he had a wonderful time. Disneyland was the least of it. And when he went home to the UK, he did pass away. And it was very peculiar because it was both sad, obviously, he lived in my apartment, but we thought we had done something wonderful because his mum was left with the memory of her kid laughing, on the beach, and not just with him, wasting away with a tube up his nose in a hospital bed. And it went around in my head. And, film producers, which is what I do for a living, we're constantly asking ourselves, can I pitch this? What's the narrative here? Where's the money going to come from? How do I crew it? Who should direct it? Who should write it? Who's the cast? And how do we distribute it? And will it be any good? And all of those things. And I realized I can take those skills sideways. And I could actually start a non-profit. So I called a meeting after work. And I said, look, this is what we just did for this one little boy. And my thinking is, we could contact Children's Hospital, places like that, and we could get access to the families with the seriously ill child. And let's, see if we can distract them from their pain. Let's see if we can entertain them. Let's make them happy. Let's make them laugh. And everyone said yes. And so we just sort of started. And I won't tell you the middle of the story, because that charity is now in Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, and across the United States. And since we founded it all those years ago, we've raised and spent well over $1 billion. We had the accounting teams go back and add up all the money off the tax returns, well over $1 billion with a B. But the important thing, or one of them, is that when the lawyer said to me, okay, so I need to incorporate this and get a tax deduction certificate, 501c3, and we all said, yeah. He said, well, what do you want to call it? And I said, I haven't given that any thought at all. I don't know. Now, when I had been crewing the meeting, I knew I needed a lawyer, I knew I needed an accountant, I knew I needed a graphic designer and someone who would understand fundraising and someone who would understand the politics of hospitals and so on and so forth. And when it came to the accountant, back in my single days, I'd had one date with this really gorgeous looking woman, and I had never called her again. I don't even know why I hadn't called her again. I phoned her up and I said, did you tell me, first of all, I apologize that you didn't hear from me. I'm, BS, I've been out of town. I can't even remember what I said. I said, did you tell me that you were an accountant? She said, I am an accountant. I said, oh, good. I really apologize. I promise not to do that again. I need an accountant for a charity meeting, this thing I'm trying to start up. When the lawyer in that meeting said, what do you want to call it? And I said, I have no idea. It was the accounting lady who said, you know that children's rhyme, Starlight, Starbright, first star I see tonight. I wish I may, I wish I might, have this wish I wish tonight. And we all said, yeah, that sounds good. And the graphic designer said, I can see the logo in my head. It's a child reaching for a star. And we all said, great. And that was the beginning of the Starlight Children's Foundation, which is now in all those countries and has raised $1 gazillion. It's one of the most supported charities by Disney, Nintendo, a bunch of other Fortune 500 companies. And it's an extraordinary thing. And the work now of thousands, but it's still the same original idea we had in the first place. These kids are sad. These kids are in pain. What can we do to ameliorate those two situations? So then I got a meeting with Steven Spielberg, and I said, would you please come in as the chairman? And he got all excited, and he donated a whole lot of money, and he became the chairman, which made a whole lot of things much easier. And we started, honest to goodness, the world's very first fully navigable, avatar-based social network. Long before Facebook, long before MySpace, long before Second Life, we were there, Starbright. And so that's Starlight, Starbright. And then I think it's very important as a leader to know when you should remove yourself from leading when you realize that there are other people itching to lead who would be really good at it, arguably better than you. And at a certain point, after running Starlight hands-on for 20 years, I said, in 1 year, I'm not going to be your president anymore. You need to choose somebody else. And if you'll have me, I'll stay on the board. And they voted me trustee for life without term limits. That was very nice of them. They didn't want to let me get away. And so I realized, now this has freed up time. And I read the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is a fantastic document. It's so simple. Children should have a name. They shouldn't be slaves. They should have the right to go to school and not to go into the army before they're 18. You shouldn't execute your children and stuff like that. And I looked in the back and it said there's 179 nations in the UN. And back then, this is now, 20-something years ago, it said that there were only 2 countries that had not ratified this treaty, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. One was the United States, And I thought, well, that's potty. That's crazy. All these Americans I know, I don't know anybody who hates children. So I took myself off to Washington and I met with Jesse Helms, and he threw me out. He said, we will never ratify this. We don't believe in international treaties. We're in charge of our country. We don't want a bunch of foreigners telling us what to do. And I said, well, it's not really, the foreigners telling us what to do. It's the whole planet, really. And it's minimum rights for children. He said, yeah, but we're never going to ratify this. It says that we couldn't execute people under 18 under any circumstances. And I said, well, why would we execute them? And he said, well, suppose they did something dreadful. They deserve to die. And I said, or possibly their brain hadn't fully developed. And that's why they did a dreadful thing. Seriously, you don't think life in prison is enough punishment for someone who does a terrible thing? You want to electrocute them or shoot them or whatever? And he said, yes, I do. And I said, oh, okay. So that was a complete bust. And then my co-founder and I of First Star, Sherry Quirk, a civil rights lawyer in Washington, we went from the Jesse Helms meeting, which was no damn good. We went and met with the lady, the dean of the Georgetown University Law School. And she heard us out very politely. And then she leaned in and she said, Ms. Quirk, Mr. Samuelson, let me save you a whole lot of effort and time. The foster care system of the United States of America is fully broken. And, hear me, it will never be fixed. And there was like an appalling silence. And I said, when you say never, do you mean never, ever, ever? Anyway, we kind of got thrown out of there as well. But we were so, I can remember I kicked the bottom of the wall in the corridor. And I said, Sherry, take deep breaths. Because I said, your whole face is red. You look as though you're going to have, a heart attack. Just be calm. And we were so angry, we said, right, well, we're doing it anyway. So we formed First Star, Starlight, Starbright, First Star, and we house, educate, and encourage teenage foster kids for 4 years. And then we get 89% of them into post-secondary education. We've got 12 academies in the United States, 3 in the United Kingdom. It's growing all the time. We've even, miracle of miracles, in some of the states, California, Utah, Arizona, and so forth, we've started getting significant funding from government, from state government, which is a whole blessing. We've had California state money, a line item in the California state budget for 4 years now. So grateful, and we're expanding as fast as we can run because clearly it works.
So that lady has said never, never, never. You proved her wrong because they're paying for it now. It's a wonderful story.
I never went back and said, nah, 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 nah. I once had a client, a management client, and eventually she got a car and she wanted a personalized license plate. And she's really made great progress as an actress. And I said, what do you want on your personalized license plate? Because my office was doing it. And she said, NNNNN. And I said, what on earth does that mean? And she said, 5 N's. And I said, what does that mean? And she said, nah, 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 nah.
Beautiful. And I got to bring this up. We kind of glossed over it. Audience, the CPA, the accountant he was talking about, is now his lovely wife.
Yeah, because, proof of concept, if you want to meet someone who's worth loving and who might just love you back, where are you going to do it? Forget the bar, forget flipping left and flipping right, it's all nonsense. Go volunteer. Look to the left, look to the right. Who are these people who are volunteering next to me? Oh, I'm getting to know them really well. Oh, they seem to be interested in whatever I'm interested in. You better be interested. You're not getting paid. And, shared activity is how you fall in love. In the case of the lady who became my wife, I know exactly when I fell in love. It was at the Christmas party at County USC Medical Center that first year, and I'd managed to persuade SeaWorld to donate costumes, life-sized fish costumes to us, adult size, and so we had people wearing them. We had a live band, and we had all the kids out of the children's ward, some of whom were so ill that they couldn't get out of bed. And one little girl, the band's playing away with a, percussion beat, and it was all very exciting. Kids are jumping up and down, but this one little girl, she danced in her bed horizontally. And I looked at the dolphin, which had like a little, it was like a burqa, it had like a little grill in the chest, which was where the adult inside, who happened to be the accountant, who I had an extra couple of dates with by then. And I looked in the grill, and she was looking at the little girl dancing, lying in the bed. And all the accountant's mascara had gone down her cheeks because she was crying like a little baby. And I thought, oh my God, I love this person. And so that was, date number 4 or something. And we carried on dating, and eventually we got engaged, and eventually we got married, and the whole of the charity came to the wedding. And I know it works because every so often I'm asked to go make a speech at someone's wedding where they've met their life partner through volunteering for one or other of my charities. And I'm like the gray hair who goes down and says nice things. The other thing, which is a little more sad, is I'm asked to do eulogies. I know my late husband's volunteering for EDAR or First Star or Starlight, whatever, was sort of the core of who he was. He loved it. Could you come and do a eulogy at the funeral? And I say, of course. And what I say is we all actually get 2 lives. There's the one where your heart beats and it has a beginning, a middle, and unfortunately eventually it has an end. We hope it's after many years, but you die. And then you have a whole other life, which I believe is just as real, which is the life that consists of you helping other people. And as they then go out and help other people, you are the pebble that sent the ripples out across the pond, and the person who is passed on in those ripples, they do not die so long as there's any ripples, because they're in them. And that life never ends, and all you have to do is help other people. Pay it forward. The best class I teach in First Star, I should also say it's one of only 2 that I'm really qualified. I'm not a professional teacher, but I teach the videography class because God knows if I don't know how to teach that, then I'm a fool. But I also teach a class that I invented called Random Acts of Kindness and Pay It Forward. And it's 2 90-minute classes taught to 10th grade. And at the beginning of the first class, I say, okay, you're walking along the sidewalk and there's an old lady in rags fast asleep, face down, her head on the crook of her elbow. What do? Do you stop, put $1 under her arm? Or do you stop, wake her up and give her $1? Or do you look the other way, cross the street, and don't look at her at all? Don't help her. And why do people do that? Why do they not do that? So we have a fine old discussion about that. And I say, well, there's this thing that is in the scriptures of every religion in the world, with no exceptions, that's called the Golden Rule. And it's the sense of social justice. It's the sense that the human heart, when you see someone who is hard done by, you see something that's unfair, it's out of whack. I saw an old lady living in a cardboard box, and I thought, wow, it says Sub-Zero on the box. I got the refrigerator, She's living in the cardboard box. That's not right. I must do something about this. So that instinct, I say, do you have to be religious? And the kids say no. The students say no, you don't have to be religious. And I say, who are my scientists here? What does the second law of thermodynamics teach us? And there's usually a couple of them, 15-year-olds who know. And they say, well, the second law says it's the theory of the law of entropy. In any closed system, what is a closed system? The engine in your car, a family, a planet. The second law says if you don't feed it, if you don't oil the engine, if you don't nurture the family, if you don't take care of climate change, it'll all turn to crap. Just leave it alone and it'll end up as random ones and zeros, won't be worth anything to anyone. And I say, now we're at the end of the first class, and that's the bell, but you will want to come tomorrow. Oh yeah? Well, you are each going to receive an amazing gift, $200 to each of you. And they are incredulous. They say, we get $200? And I say, well, you can't keep it. You have to give it away. How does that work? Well, you're going to write a 300-word essay to whom or to what you wish it to go. And then we're going to go together as a group and we're going to give it to them. And then we're going to go back a couple of weeks later and we're going to see if it was any good. Did the unhoused gentleman buy the shoes or did he buy a big bottle of brandy? Sometimes philanthropy doesn't work. They write the most astonishing little essays. My name is Jose. I'm adding $10. That makes 210, which is 3 times 70. And $70 is the money you have to give to the animal shelter for them not to euthanize a dog. And I am going to save 3 puppies. And the reason I'm going to save 3 puppies is the last time I was down there, I looked into the eyes of a puppy that had been very badly beaten. And I saw my own eyes because I was very badly beaten as well. So I'm saving 3 puppies. Love, Jose. My mum is in prison for another 2 years, 3 months and 7 days. They always know exactly how long. And she did very bad things, including she did very bad things to me. But I love her. She's my mum. And I know she hates the shampoo. So I'm putting the money in her prison account so that she can buy better toiletries. Love, Sheila. So all the kids are about 12 inches taller after this class and after we go around giving money away. It's the most wonderful thing. And I think it is very close to the meaning of life. Right there, it's giving agency to the person who is exhibiting generosity. It's creating camaraderie with their friends, their pals in the cohort of the First Star Academy. It's obviously doing good in the world, but actually the biggest beneficiaries, I think, are the ones who are, giving the help. And I think if you do that, and especially if you mentor, ripples on the pond, pay it forward, and that way you'll live forever.
It's so wonderful because the second time I've heard this story, agency is the word. You're right. You don't tell them what to do. Go to a homeless guy, give him $200. You guys have to come up with it. So now they got to do creative thinking. We give too much away in America. We don't let people make those. And that's why I love this, because what an age to do this.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. And we get so many questions coming in. Real quick, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to take a short break. But my email is there. That question that Peter just put out, those 3 options, and say them again, the 3 options you told the students.
The old lady is clearly unhoused, homeless, and she's fast asleep. Do you give her $1 quietly, carefully, don't wake her up? Or number 2, do you wake her up and give her the $1? Or number 3, don't give her anything, walk on by.
So those are your 3 things. I want you to email me because I want to share them with Peter, what your response is. And we'll look at them. If there's a good response, I'm going to send some gifts out. because we're doing agency again. We're putting you out to serve. Together we serve. He's so perfect for this. Volunteering is serving, serving is paying it forward. I'm going to use that ripples. It's the ripples. So let's take a quick break, let him get some water, and let's watch him on his TEDx talk. It's pretty powerful. So we'll be right back in a few minutes.
I wish tonight. My odyssey, such as it is, started by being the first kid in my whole extended family that ever went to college. I managed to get myself a full ride to Cambridge. I got a bachelor's, I got a master's. I came out and discovered, to my shock, my horror, that there was no ready market for a master's in English literature, at least that I could find. So after banging around a little bit in the UK, I immigrated to Los Angeles because I read about this thing called the American Dream, all about give us your huddled masses, and I figured I can be a huddled mass. And so
Scribe is how you stop explaining the same thing over and over at work. Watch this. It'll change your life. Raise your hand.
I came to LA, discovered nobody was terribly interested in English literature there either. However, there was this thing called the motion picture industry, and I managed to incrementally work my way up in that business as a motion picture producer. And rapidly, because in America we promote much faster than in Europe, I became a producer of over 25 years, 25 films. Every year, the ultimate entrepreneurial task: have the idea, get the script written, hire the director, raise the capital, hire the cast, make the film, sell it, move on to the next the following year. Arlington Road, Wild, Tom and Viv, and a film which I know is particularly emotional and meaningful for everyone in this room, I produced Revenge of the Nerds.
How many of you remember that show, Revenge of the Nerds? I've told a few people about that and having Peter on my show, and I tell you what, everybody smiles when I say Revenge of the Nerds. And you older people out there get it and probably understand it. I'm going to bring him back. And what I love about Peter, I truly love from the bottom of my heart, is he turned happiness into a skill. And he wrote a book about that. Happiness is a skill, like a skill, digging a hole, fixing a plumb, your sink, you're reading a book, whatever that skill is. Happiness can be a skill to build up other people and grow yourself. Let's bring Peter back, and I want to share this screen. Peter, that was a great TEDx talk, by the way. I listened to the whole thing. It's awesome. Let's bring up the book so people can see it. Talk about the book and what the whole thing is about with this.
So last year, I thought, I've got this pattern recognition from all the mentoring. I know what bothers these young adults, and it's repetitive. And I thought, I could write a kind of manual for your life. What I now know, which I wish I knew when I was 18, or a user's guide to your life with lessons from mine. And so I got up every morning. You have to have self-discipline. That's part of the book. I got up every morning at 5 a.m. and wrote for 1 hour. And then I went down and had breakfast. And at the end of, 8 months, I had a book. And then I thought, well, no one's going to be interested in this. I also, while I was writing it, I realized I have examples from my own checkered career as a producer, which I can use to illustrate the chapters in the book. So there's a chapter, what is a good risk? What is a bad risk? How can you tell the difference? And I thought, God, well, there's at least 2 occasions where I almost died because I was a stupid young man. And I should share those. So I did. So it's about 50% life hacks for Gen Z, lower millennials, and, frankly, for anybody who will take a good idea and make it their own. And the other half is like adventures in the screen trade. The example I used for how to tell a good risk from a bad risk was an incredibly stupid thing that I did. I was the production manager on The Return of the Pink, and I got behind on the accounts, and I decided I'll pull an all-nighter and just get the damn things done. So there I am at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, sitting in my office, which was a high floor in this big old hotel in Marrakesh, the Mamounia Palace, and I heard a cat meowing, and sounded like a kitten, and I ignored it. And after about 20 minutes, I thought, well, I've got to do something about this because it's driving me mad. And I followed my ears, and the meowing was coming from the bathroom. So I went in the bathroom, and there was a big old sort of cupboard in the wall, and I opened it for the first time, and it wasn't a cupboard, it was a pipe duct. And I looked in, and I had a flashlight, and I looked down. There were two little red amber eyes at the bottom. That was the kitten, meowing plaintively up at me. And I thought, well, it's disgusting in here, and it smells, and it's got to be 4 or 5 floors down there. I'm not doing that. So sorry, Mr. or Ms. Kitten. I went back to my desk, and I couldn't focus on the accounts because this cat was just meowing. And eventually I thought, okay, I'm coming. And I went in the bathroom, and I stripped naked. And I thought, well, it'll be good because when I get back up here, I can have a shower and then get dressed again in the same clothes. And I shinned down. There were several pipes, but there was a really big one, probably a drain pipe. And I shinned down it, and it was disgusting. It was slick and dirty and awful. I got to the bottom. There was the kitten. And I said, hello, kitten. And I held out my hand, and it ran away and was never seen or heard of again. That was the end of the interaction with the kitten. And I thought, oh, for goodness sake, waste of time. Okay, now I have to climb back up. And I realized very quickly I didn't have the upper body strength to climb back up this pipe. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. So I had a few goes, and I could only get 15 feet up, but it must have been 50 feet all the way to where I needed to get to. So I went back to the bottom, and I had a little think, and I thought, all right, it's not a time for, modesty. So I started screaming and shouting. Nobody came. It used to be a royal palace. The walls were many feet of stone thick, and no one could hear me. So I thought, well, isn't this interesting? I'm actually going to die at the age of 22, I guess it was, or 23. I'm going to die at the bottom of a pipe duct in a Moroccan hotel. And then, so I had a little rest, and I thought, okay, I've got to be clever about this. And I made myself take 2 hours to get back to the level of my office, by doing it very, very slowly and wedging myself in. And eventually I did it. And I toppled backwards into the bathroom, got in the shower, got clean, got dressed, went back to my desk, could barely catch my breath. And there was a knock on the door, and in came one of my crew, some guy, electrician guy, or a grip. And he came in, he said, oh, fantastic that you're here so early. It's only just dawn. I wonder if I could go over my petty cash with you, because I could really use with some topping up, and I can give you all the receipts. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, you have no idea. I just had a near-death experience. So I used that in the book to illustrate the fact that, especially young men, because young women are smarter earlier, but young men don't get the prefrontal lobe of their brain tricked out until their mid-20s to late 20s. And until then, they're making decisions based on the amygdala, the back of the brain, the reptilian fight or flight. And I got that one wrong, and it nearly killed me. And the front of the brain is the chess game of life. Ask yourself the question, why do we send young men in their early 20s to fight in battles. Well, because the middle-aged men, if you sent them, they would take one look at the machine guns pointing at them, and they'd say, Sarge, you know, it's kind of looks pretty dangerous out there. Maybe you should go. And when you get to the other end, give us a shout and tell us if it was safe, and then we'll follow you. That's what the front of the brain would do, but the back of the brain is the reptilian. Hoorah, hoorah, hoorah. And, you know, that's why so many young men die in wars, because that's who the older men send, because they'll be damned if they're going themselves. Yeah. So, you know, and we give them uniforms so that they just do what they're told and so forth. But the primary thing is that they don't process risk completely as a kind of chess game, looking several moves ahead until later in their life. Anyway, so that's an example of how I used my stories, some of which are, I think, very funny, some of which are scary as heck, and some of which are deeply embarrassing, but I used them anyway. And the book is selling like hotcakes. It was #1 bulk book sales nonfiction during the summer at one point. And that means it's being bought as a curriculum book by high schools and colleges. I thought I would have to self-publish it, and then Simon & Schuster Regalo took the, respectively, Regalo is the boutique that's the publisher, and Simon & Schuster is all the distribution, and they work together. I'm so glad that I did it. The latest thing that's happened is that there's going to be a graphic novel version of it. We're just sorting that out at the moment. There's an audio book, there's a Kindle ebook, and there's a team who are, I hope, knocking on wood, about to make me an offer that I can't refuse to make a documentary of the book. Partly it would be, 100 or 110 minute full length feature documentary, but it would also be cut down by topic into 4, 5, 6 minute segments. And that would be educational, one per topic. So yeah, that's the book. It's Finding Happy. I came up with the design for the cover, and what I thank God the publisher gave me a graphic designer, because I have the graphic design ability of a newt. What I came up with is the fact that the more prevalent the noun, the word, the subject, the bigger the font on the cover. But there's also all these little itty-bitty words.
And dare and adventure, parents, school.
Yeah, you got that little blur. This camera doesn't focus close. But, so it's all there in the book. Young adults seem to love it. Their parents seem to love it. Sometimes it's easier, even if you're an excellent parent, there's stuff you can't talk about. What is the difference between love and sex? It's kind of important to work that out, but it's for some parents, it's just not something they can talk to their kids about. But I've got it in here, and I didn't only write the stuff that needed an expert. I went and got help. So, for example, I felt I have to have a chapter about how to be arrested without being shot dead. Always an advantage not to die. But I felt it's sort of presumptuous of me to write it. So I got a young man of color to co-write it with me. And he did a hell of a job. And it's in there, in the book. I also got advice from the ACLU. And, there's a time to argue. That would be the courtroom. Do not argue when a young man wearing a police uniform and pointing a gun at you who is really angry. Don't argue with him. Do whatever he says. You'll have your moment. You'll get a lawyer who will show you the ropes, and you can have your victory. But if you have your victory now, let alone if you turn tail and run, very bad stuff can happen to you, and don't do it. So it's all there in the book. The book is deeply non-political. I think the stuff that's in this book is one of the few areas in our polarized society where everybody agrees. Everybody thinks these are important things and our kids should get them right. And maybe there's a meeting ground there. I don't know. But I have loved, or the publisher said, you're raving mad to put your email in the book. What will you do if you get 10,000 emails? And I said, I don't know, that'd be great. I'll hire people and we'll reply. And I didn't get 10,000, but I got almost 1,000 at this point. And I've been, disciplining myself to reply to some every day, and I'm getting there. And but then there's more that come in, and some of the stuff that the target audience have said to me in those emails, it's just wonderful. And I've also, with a really good friend, Bill Catuzzi, we donated money to First Star to buy 700 copies of the book and to give them for love to all the current students and alumni of First Star. And as I said, we've got 15 of these academies. And during the summer, I ran around all over the place on the book tour, not just going into bookstores and signing a gazillion copies, but also going to the university and meeting with the First Star scholars who had had the book a couple of weeks. And most of them had read at least some of it. I say to them, you don't have to read the whole book. Look at the table of contents, find what you're perplexed by, go there. See if it's helpful.
I love this book. We're coming to the end here. Is this book for all ages?
I think so. I'm amazed by how there's stuff in it which adults say to me, I never thought of that. I mean, there's some, really mundane, basic stuff like how to be organized. If you feel that you just have too many problems and they're all biting you at once, how can you use a thing called a spider graph to do a schematic of your challenges, and who are the protagonists, the antagonists who are giving you a hard time in each of those challenges, and then what might be possible solutions, and then let's color code it from the most urgent to the least urgent, and let's get a system going here. And then you'll feel as though you're in charge of your life and not your life is in charge of you. The worst thing about being a foster kids are the concentrated soup stock of human challenges. I mean, everything is awful for them. PTSD, abused, neglected, poor. They have no agency, and why would it ever change? No one takes them seriously. If you can work out how to help them, my thought has been, and apparently it's turned out to be true, if you can help them, then you can help anybody. And yes, I think it is for all ages. And what I've noticed, which is kind of fantastic, it says it in some of the reviews online, Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com and all the rest of them. People buy 2 copies because they buy 1 copy to give to their grandchild, but then they start reading it and they think, oh, well, now what do I do? So then they buy the Kindle and read it themselves. So, or maybe they hang on to the first one and give it to the kid dog-eared. I don't know.
Well, Peter, you're a servant's heart. Audience, there's the link to firststar.org. Grab it. The book is in Amazon. It's Finding Happy. You'll see it. Peter Samuelson. I've got it. It's a great book. There it is again, A User's Guide to Your Life with Lessons from Mine. How about that? He's sharing his whole life to help you grow. That's a true servant's heart. Peter, thank you again for being a blessed guest, taking your time to talk to my audience and being just wonderful.
There's horrible things in the world right now, but there's more to be optimistic about than to be pessimistic about. And I'm here to tell you that.
Thank you, Peter. And we'll see you all in the next episode, which is next Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Together We Serve TV show. And again, reach out to Peter. If you got to answer that question, email me or reach out to Peter. We'd love to hear your answers. You all have a great rest of the day. Talk to you soon.